Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Friendly Exmuslim podcast. I'm your host, Abdullah Samir. Today we have part two of Aboo Imran's story, and we're going to go through the second half of the journey, or maybe the second third. We'll see how it goes. Before we get started, just want to remind everyone that this podcast is also available on other platforms. So feel free to check out your favorite podcast platforms such as Stitcher, iTunes, whatever. Look up Friendly Exmuslim and you'll find us there. So Aboo Imran is with me, and before we get into the second part of his journey, I'm just going to go through the first part. So this is a reminder for those of you who missed the first part. In the first part, we talked about his the initial part of his story, and I'm going to just summarize it. If you haven't seen it, do check out the link for part one below. It's also very interesting. So in part one of our conversation, Aboo Imran shared his background and journey. He's now an agnostic ex-Muslim. So as of today, he's an agnostic ex-Muslim, heavily involved in the Salafi movement, translated and published over 8 Islamic works by Salafi scholars that are still being used and widely read around the world. We're going to go through how he ended up where he is now. So in part one, in summary, he was raised Catholic and in his early life lost a friend in a drive-by, which caused some soul-searching. In the Fort Worth Library, he came across a translation of the Quran. He read it and 1 week later became Muslim. Again, I'm skipping a lot of details, but this is a quick summary. Then he went to a masjid, met Abu Abdullah, and converted to Islam. He tried to study overseas. That didn't work out. Came back and married a Muslim convert. Because, again, details are in the first one. Later, he was given a dawah booklet by Ahmed Deedat. Ahmed Deedat is a very popular preacher, debater, and you can say he was Zakir Naik is his protege. So basically, what Zakir Naik does, this is what this guy used to do. Nowadays, he's passed away now, so you may not know him, but this is what he is. So he got inspired. He sent him a letter. And then nothing happened. He began learning Arabic, reading the Quran, memorizing the Quran, and then eventually he got a whole box of books plus a signed letter from Ahmed Deedat. He then started college, but was too conflicted with what was being taught and his religious beliefs. So the stuff that they were teaching in the school was conflicting with the values that he was getting from Islam. So later on, he moved back to where he used to live and he started hanging out with the cool kids again, basically, the Salafis. And the wali is basically the man that is representative of a woman in a marriage. So the wali of his wife said, Ahmed Deedat is misguided and you have to get rid of all of your books of Ahmed Deedat. So then he started becoming more hardcore Salafi, because Salafis consider everybody, well, there's more nuance than that, but Salafis tend to consider all the other sects as misguided, right? Including, Ahmed Deedat, who was obviously not Salafi. Then, he started studying, he got better at Arabic, was working on hifz, hadith, aqidah, adab, and so on. So doing the full thing, the full 9 years of Islamic studies, right? Around this time, broke up with his wife. So this is now, I think we're at the point now where we are going to now go to the second part of the journey. So how's it going, Aboo Imran?
It's going good, Abdullah. How about you?
Good, thank you. So that's kind of a nutshell. Obviously, a lot of details missed. Hopefully I didn't get anything wrong there in the summary, but so we're at now the second part of your journey. You want to tell us what happened next?
Yes, so we're going to pick up from the divorce from my first wife. We talked about her age, and then we talked about my second wife that I married. She was also young. She had 3 children. I took those 3 children in, and we started a family. And we ended up having, through our marriage, 3 biological children of our own, and I raised the stepchildren. And we're in Dallas for a little bit, and then we decide to go to Atlanta for whatever reasons. And So this is around 2006, and I'm going to just summarize 2006 to about 2009, where I hit into my 20s, going into my mid 30s, and then I'll talk about going to Egypt and what prompted me to go there. Around 2007, my Arabic progressed at a level where I was encouraged by others to start trying to translate. And so I was pushed to do that. And there's these little indie Salafi book publishers wanted me to do some work for them. Because I started doing like little translations, and we would post them online and some of these little Salafi sites that we had. And they give me the task for this one book, and I do. It's this one here. It's a book it's an explanation of the three principles by Sheikh bin Baz, and the text is from Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, which, you know, is where you get the derogatory term, the Wahhabis. So I translate this book, and people see it, and it's like, wow, who's this guy translating, you know? And so some word of mouth spreads to the other little Salafi book publishers, and they start, you know, saying, "There's this Mexican guy, he's translating this book, man, look at how he translated it." And just to mention real quick, I'm just going to probably try to keep it short. I end up doing this with two or three other book publishers, and I translate other books. And one that becomes really, really popular is this book here. It's a warning from the dangers of the hair salon and the hairstylist. This is the first one. This is the second. Yeah. And this was really popular with the Salafi wives.
Uh-huh.
It's written by a sheikha, is a female scholar. I'm going to talk about another book from her husband, and they're from the students of Sheikh Muqbil in Yemen. So I translate that book. This book becomes really popular. They do a second edition of it. I start doing some other ones. I'm not going to show those, but there's another one that I really, really enjoyed. This one here is about the angels.
Belief of Muslim sects, it says?
Yeah, it's the belief of the Muslim sects, Jews, Christians, philosophers, and idolaters regarding the angels. And I only did volume 1. There's supposed to be a 3 set. And this one is translated by, this was translated by me, but written by Dr. Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab al-Aqil. He was a professor in Medina. And so I translated, it's his dissertation. So I translated that. And this one is really a lot more academic in the sense of how it approaches belief in the angels and why Muslims believe in angels, their names, all of the really authentic information about the angels and Iblis and was he an angel and, you know, all these different things. So that one is one of my favorite. And then another one, woman book, issues the Muslim woman should concern herself with. This one is by Sheikh Abdullah ibn Jarullah, who's from Saudi Arabia.
Those are they're like thick books.
Yeah. Well, you know what's funny about this one, Abdullah? This one really, it was short when I translated it, and I think it's because the publisher they were paying me by the page, and so he stretched it out. And so when I got my copy, I was like, "Hey, I didn't get paid for 106 pages." So yeah, they stretched it out a little bit, and then with the Arabic in there, it stretches it more out.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say the reason I'm laughing, not to be rude, but it sounds funny, the dangers of the hairstylist.
Yeah. Going back to this one, some of the stories on this is like, now I look at it and think, what was I thinking? But there is some crazy shit in there. If anybody Googles it and gets a copy,
Islam is protecting the women from salons.
Hairstylists, you got to be careful. Don't imitate the And then another one here is The Mahdi by Sheikh Abdul Muhsin Al-Abad. This was a collaboration. I did some of it, and then another brother who put it out did the rest of it. And then another woman's book. This one was popular also. The Numerous Mistakes Regarding the Hajj of the Muslim Woman. So the one who did the sheikha who did the hair salon book, this is her husband.
Oh, okay.
And so now he's telling you women what you're not supposed to be doing in Hajj.
Yeah.
Okay. So those are just some of the books. And I just wanted to mention those because when I first came to Minnesota and I got with my last wife, they were actually people saying, you know, when I said I've translated books, people were saying he's lying. He's never translated anything. And so I always kept the books just thinking, my name is in most of all of them. So my kunya Aboo Imran is in there. So it's like,
Yeah.
oh, really? I haven't. Well, here's the proof.
Yeah.
So I get busy doing that through the years. You know, those are a progression of years. And there's a video on my channel where I talk about specifically about my translation background, and you can go into that and look at it more in detail if you want to. But I thought I'd mention it here just for that reason. And so you could see just some of the topics that I was dealing with, which are, as you can see, you're already shocked by the hair salon one. It's an interesting read. So shorten it down. There's some problems that happen with the second marriage, and I won't get into that, but I end up going back to El Paso with the kids, all the kids, my children and the stepchildren. We go to El Paso for a while just to try to see if things will work out. And around that time, I decided to take a second wife. And so I ended up talking with a brother who's his actual sister's interested in marriage, and she's living in Egypt with her children. And so I said, okay, this would be a great opportunity for me to do what is called making hijrah. So making hijrah is the concept that you leave Darul Kufr, you leave the lands of disbelief for Darul Iman, the lands of belief, right? So a lot of Salafis try to do this. I thought this would be my way to do this, you know, and also to have another wife and, you know, start another family. And, you know, thinking with the wrong head, I didn't think that it would really affect my first wife in the way that it did. And I would say that I contributed to the problems we were already having because of that selfish decision that I decided to make to take on another wife. And not even really being financially stable. Just, I mean, most of the time, like we talked about the marriage thing, when you take a second wife, it's the same mentality. Oh, just trust Allah and Allah will provide, the rizq will come. You know, you're taking a second, a third, and a fourth. Watch, Allah will make you just bountiful with all of this rizq.
Yeah, I was taught the same thing too, that have kids and you'll see that for each kid that you have, the blessing and the rizq, the providence from Allah will just shower down on you. And in Canada, you get child tax benefits. So I guess the Kufr government is giving you the rizq.
That's crazy. So we make arrangements. I get married to the second wife in Egypt, and I end up going to Egypt. And the plan was to go there, get situated, and then send for the first family. And I stay there, and then she gets a hookup with some friends in Saudi Arabia for me to teach in Saudi Arabia. And so the plan shifts from Egypt to Saudi Arabia. And what we thought initially would have just been about a month for the paperwork, it turns into almost 3 months that we're staying there in Egypt. And
where were you in Egypt?
Yeah, I was about to say, good question. So I was in a small town called Shibin al-Qum. Okay, Shibin al-Qum is probably about 45 minutes north of Cairo. It's in a governorate called Manufia, and it's very village-like, very agricultural. So it was a really huge difference from what I'm used to. I mean, even being from the border town of El Paso, where you have a lot of what they would consider third world conditions, this was like, I wasn't prepared for life in this kind of like village / town. It was totally different for me, and I liked it. Don't get me wrong, but I did get sick several times. I did get flu. I got, you know, a lot of problems with the water, and it was a really, really hard adjustment for me. And there, while I was there, I got to visit. There's a very famous Salafi Sheikh there in that area called Sheik Saleh Al-Fawzan, and he has a masjid there. And so I went a few times and got to see, you know, what his study area looked like and the people there. And there was a lot of Americans who had made hijrah who were there studying with him. And I got to meet some of them and talk with them and just network and see what was going on there. And it's there then in Egypt that I start to realize the whole concept of hijrah. For me, I start to have my doubts, and I start to see it's kind of like a fallacy the way it is, because Egypt, like all the Muslim majority countries, they have the same vices as non-Muslim countries, right? You see drugs, you see prostitution, you see all of these different things that are going on. It's, you know, no different. I even remember one time someone had mentioned something about a serial killer, and I was like, what, a serial killer in Egypt? And it's just it blew me away because you're taught, it's better to go to these countries than to be in America, right? Because you can't. The idea you can't practice your Islam, of course, is totally not true. You probably could practice your Islam better in America than you can in some Muslim countries.
Yeah. Can I say something about Egypt before you continue?
Go ahead.
Because I lived in Egypt for 6 months as well. I was in Miami, in Alexandria, and it was a culture shock for us too. Even in the city, it was a culture shock. Like, it was shocking. Like, there's like, things can fall on your head when there's construction. There's no safety zones.
Yeah.
There's just people that are carrying like couches up on ropes outside the buildings. It's like there's baskets that you like put down to like, order food. There's this bawab, which you know what a bawab is. And they speak amele, like they speak totally different. Even if you learn Arabic, it's like you struggle to understand what they're saying. It was a huge culture shock for me. And I also got sick. I got bronchitis. Not the chronic bronchitis, the acute bronchitis. I got really sick for like 6. Thankfully, all of us were throwing up. We all got sick as well, even though we weren't drinking the water, but somehow we still got sick. And I wanted to share one thing that was very interesting, that many Muslim friends I know that went to Egypt told me the same thing as you. They wanted to come back to Canada. They're like religious Salafis, big beards, wearing thobe. They wear thobe in public. They're like, those type of Salafis. And they're like, I didn't like it in Egypt. I was like, why? I couldn't like understand as a Canadian Muslim. I'm like, they're like, oh, so many things. And, and they wanted to come back to Canada. The Muslim guy that was helping us around in Egypt, the Egyptian, he told me he went for Fajr. Some people put a cloth over his head. They kidnapped him. They were asking him questions about what he was doing and this and that. Like, yeah, I never got kidnapped for going to Fajr prayer in Canada, like the dawn prayer. But like in Egypt, apparently Muslims get, harassed for being religious. So yeah, you're right. It's this false, like this utopian dream you have. And when you get there, you're like this place. And the most, people get mad at me for saying this, but the most disgusting washrooms I've ever seen in my life, like I almost vomited, were in Egypt, the Muslim country. In Canada, I've never seen anything even like 5% as bad as that. I was like horrified. Like, I don't even want to describe what I saw. Like, even the cleanliness in the Muslim country. I mean, not all Muslim countries are like that. And obviously there's a difference of, wealth and stuff like that. But like, I was taught in Islam, cleanliness is the most important thing. And I'm going to a Muslim country and I'm like, what is this?
You mentioned that, and I think I was stopped twice by the mukhabarat while I was there. I was the secret police.
Oh, okay.
I was stopped twice in Egypt, and twice, and it was always in Cairo, because in Shibin, people, I guess I look Egyptian. People always thought I was just Egyptian, but when I would speak, and they hear my Arabic, they're like, this guy is, and I even, because I got so tired of being ripped off because I'm American, I started just saying, my dad is Egyptian and my mom's Mexican. So people are like, oh, and they would start being nicer to me. It's just like you want to play the game, I'll play it too.
Yeah, I used to stop saying I'm Canadian. I started saying I'm Kenyan because I'm from Kenya, right? And they're like, African, Afriki or something. Right? I'm like, I'm like confused right now. Like, you're African, you're not black. But when you say Canadian, I remember one guy said, "Oh, Canadian. In Canada they charge $9 for one sandwich." I was like, okay, but I'm here on vacation with my savings. I'm not making Canadian dollars while I'm in Egypt.
Yeah. They don't care. They don't care. Yeah, so there's some other things too that started to sink in. I'm glad we talked about that because I have that noted here. Yeah. I started noticing that Muslims fight with each other just like Christians. As in the town that I was in, they had the Azharis on one side, you had the Salafis on the other, and it was then that I'd been so sheltered with Salafis and avoiding Ashari things, Ashari text, Ashari speakers, and all that. That was the first time that I actually got to hear. You would see Azharis and Salafis on the street corner waiting for a bus, arguing with each other. It was the first time I would hear them making some good points in the Salafis. And so I would be like, wow, okay, I'd never heard that, or, I didn't know about these specific texts that exist about Tawheed and how they viewed it. This
was all in Arabic.
Yeah, this was in Arabic, and then I would frequent like these little used bookstores or bookstores that were there, and the book dealers know a lot about the books they sell. And so, I would go in there and ask them, if I would hear them arguing and they would mention a text, then like you hear a lot of Jawharatul Tawheed is a famous text that the Asharis use, and I would ask, where is that text, or who's explained it, and then the bookseller would show you all the books on that text and who's explained it and the viewpoints, and so you start to pick up a lot of it too, and it was very hard to pick up the Egyptian dialect for me, being accustomed to speaking in Fusha, and I had to learn to kind of tone it down a bit because people were like, "Why are you talking like a grammar book?" Like, and they could tell you're obviously not,
So you were able to understand discourse between Asharis and Salafis on the street corners, like, so you had like pretty good Arabic then.
Well, I wouldn't say that it was pretty good. I would just say you can use context clues and things that they're saying. No, there's times when the rapid speech, they start getting mad at each other that you get lost in it. But for the most part, when they start talking about, and what's amazing about the religious is that they'll start using Fusha when they're doing arguments, and so the language changes up.
So you can understand more.
Yeah, because they're starting to quote hadith. They're starting to quote, Qala Imam Ibn Taymiyyah. Ibn Taymiyyah says this, or Qala Imam Tahawi. Imam Tahawi says this, and so when they're quoting, you're picking up what they're saying.
And just for people that don't understand, Fusha is like formal Arabic, whereas like what Egyptians and whatever other countries speak is colloquial Arabic, right? So like when I said amale, there's nothing in Arabic called amale. How are you? You say kayfa haluka. But if you talk like that in Egypt, kayfa haluka ya akhi, they'll be like, what is this? Like, what's wrong with you? Why are you talking like that, right?
Well, this goes back to this idea of prescriptivism versus descriptivism, and so you'll start to see, like, you're right. Amale is very Egyptian, what's going on. You wouldn't say that in Fusha. So Fusha meaning the classical Arabic, and it would be equivalent to somebody today speaking in Shakespearean English. Can you imagine someone speaking like that to you? And you would just be like, why are you talking like that?
But what about like in the news and stuff?
So then, okay, so you can also differentiate between al-Fusha and al-Lughat al-Arabiyya al-Mu'assara, which is modern standard Arabic, and modern standard Arabic incorporates all of the various loan words. So for example, if you wanted to, you could say in standard Arabic, telfaz for a television. Some say television, which is borrowed from like French and Spanish. A telfaz is a telfaz. That's a very, it's made into an Arabic word. That's not, telfaz you won't find in the Quran, right? So, but you will find the word sayara in the Quran. Surah Yusuf, you'll find the word sayara. Now, is it the sayara that is used today? Of course not. It's not a car. It's a carriage. It's something that an animal pulls with wheels. So that's your sayara back then. So that's Fusha. And then sayara today, meaning a car. But then you get to Egypt, and what do they call a car? They call a car an Arabiya. They don't call it a sayara.
Yeah.
So we have all of this issue, and it's all language, and it's you see how language is used differently. That's another thing that I noticed too. Language played a big part in me starting to lose faith as well, and to see how it's not all about being strict and always speak in Fusha. It's when you're in an emergency in Egypt, you're not going to speak in Fusha to a police officer. You're going to try to use the language that's going to help you, and so that started to come into play as well. I noted here Sufis had other viewpoints that were silenced by the Salafis, and as I said, I started to see that they also had their own viewpoints that can make sense. And then I came to this conclusion: what makes a country special over another? And I said, it's kind of subjective. Like, I don't know how many times I had Egyptians say, "How do I get to America?" And it's like, why did they want to leave? And these are people I'm seeing in the masjid, in the mosque, on Friday prayers. Why do they want to go to America? I'd see Christian Egyptians who wanted to go to America, like, they didn't want to stay in Egypt. And they had their reasons, it's the government, and just they didn't feel that they had opportunities. And everybody's entitled to their opinion. It's all subjective. And that's another thing that I started to see. It's all in the eye of the individual. And so I started to get a little bit more open-minded as I started to see life differently in a Muslim majority country. And so the visa finally gets approved. It's about 3 months that we're waiting. And we had to teach, for me to teach in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. It was a job that we got through some friends of hers who had a company that they made there. For what they did was they would bring mostly Salafis from like the UK, Canada, and America to the United States to go teach English there in Saudi Arabia, because the Saudi government preferred that they be Muslims teaching their students, of course. And there seem to be a lot of problems with non-Muslims. You know, they want to drink, they want to sleep around, and you can't do that in Saudi Arabia. So the focus at that time was there was a lot of people who are Muslim coming from those countries into Saudi Arabia to do that. And it's been like that for a while. So mind you, I have no degree. I have no credentials in that area. I'm just going to go teach English by virtue of the fact that I got to hook up with these friends of my second wife, and by virtue of the fact that I'm a native English speaker. That's the only thing going for me, okay? And some would say, no, it's Allah, brother, but that's the reality of what was going on. So we're switching gears now. 2009, 2010, I'm in Saudi Arabia. I'm doing the whole polygyny thing, 2 wives, 1 in America, 1 in Saudi Arabia. And I end up eventually having to go back and forth because of some visa issues. And while I'm there, while I'm working, the days that I don't work, or most of the time after I finish work, I start going to the study circles of Sheik Saleh Al-Fawzan, who is considered like one of the major scholars in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And not that I'm anybody special. These are open lessons. Durus Amma. This is open to the public, and this is for everyone to come and go to his classes. And of course, as you go to this specific mosque he would teach in, you'd see just hundreds of people of all different backgrounds. I have to give it that. It was a lot of diversity. And I think I would see more people who are non-Saudi than I saw Saudis going into to these lessons.
So you're sitting on the floor and you have like a notebook and you're making notes?
Yeah. So that's a good question. So it's traditionally the traditional way, which is what I loved. He actually sits in a desk, there's a desk with a chair and the microphone, and he sits down after the prayer. And it was usually from Maghrib to Isha, and everybody's sitting on the floor. And then he has what is called a qari, who reads whatever text, and they'll read the text, and then he'll stop them and explain it. So I did here, I put Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, which in those days was considered like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And I would attend 3 of his classes out of the 4 that he would give. I didn't go to his tafsir class. I'd go to Tawheed, I'd go to Hadith, and I'd go to fiqh class. Hanbali fiqh is where I start learning more about Hanbalis. And I also study in other study circles. I study Al-Qawaid Al-Arba'a, famous text by Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, with one of Sheikh Fawzan's students, Sheikh Abdulaziz ibn Shibl. I go over the four principles. I study sections of Kitab al-Sunnah by Sheikh Abdulaziz al-Rajihi, who's one of the students of Sheikh bin Baz. He's elder. And these are like little, in the summertime, they call them these dawrat sayfiyya. So it's in the summertime. The major ulama, because it's so hot in Riyadh, they go to Ta'if and they have their summer homes there. And then the other people are just, taking all of these courses that you give. And so these are like little courses. And again, not that I'm special. I'm just a regular person, regular Muslim, going to these classes like everybody else who's regular and benefiting while I'm there teaching and then seeking knowledge. And I'm teaching English at this place. I'm not going to say the name, but it was a plastic fabrication company. And what it was is the Saudi teenagers, like guys who had finished high school but couldn't get into college. It's not good if you can't get into college. You can't, the whole thing is to go to school, go to college, get married, have a lot of kids, right? And so these guys, they flunked out. They couldn't get into college. They only had a diploma. And the process is, okay, if they can't get into college, then what do we do? And so the government made up this program to teach them plastic fabrication to get a diploma. And so in order to get the diploma, they had to speak English. Well, they didn't know English. So it was a 1-year program where they had to learn English because it was run by the Japanese. And the Japanese were like, we're not teaching these guys Japanese. They're not going to learn it. So let's just teach them English. So that's why we were there. All of us who was in that specific department, English department, we were tasked with teaching them English so they could go into those classes and get their diploma. And you're talking about guys who just didn't want to learn English. Like I remember one student was like, teacher, English haram. He's like, so he had a lot of pushback from some that just didn't want to be there, but they wanted to get the diploma because their parents are like, you don't get a diploma, you don't have a trade, you don't get married, you're getting cut off. Like, that's it. We're not helping you. And there's another thing in Saudi Arabia too that I noticed. It's called wusta. So wusta is like the hookup, like who do you know? And that's how things are done in Saudi Arabia. If you know people, you get stuff done. You don't know people, you're shit out of luck. That's just the way it is in Saudi Arabia. You gotta have wusta, you know what I'm saying? So while I'm there at that job, I get an offer, a permanent offer for a permanent job with them. But the condition is I have to go to America, get the approval at the Saudi embassy in America, and then come back. Okay?
Oh,
it's strange.
Yeah.
Now, the job was nice. It was paying pretty good money, and the cost of living in Saudi Arabia was very low at that time. And so it was doable. I was taking care of, got the second wife, and I'm sending money back home to the first wife and the kids. And we start having some problems. Thank you. Yes, wasta. I said wasta. Wasta. See how just a little vowel can change the whole meaning of something in Arabic? And I said, okay, I got to go back to America. I'll get things prepared. And then I will come back to Saudi Arabia and then send for the family for sure. Because then I'll be bona fide. I'll have all the paperwork and everything there. And I get back to the States and turn in the paperwork and all that. And the Saudi embassy's like, okay, where's your bachelor's degree? I was like, I don't have a bachelor's degree. I said, well, the condition for this job is you have to have a bachelor's degree. And I'm like, they didn't tell me that. When they hired me in Saudi Arabia, they said I was hired. They didn't say nothing about a bachelor's.
Yeah.
Well, we're telling you we're not approving this because you don't have a degree. So I said, okay. Things start to get problematic. How the hell do I get back?
Yeah.
And so in Saudi Arabia, my second wife, she does some things with some of the people there, and they give her like, okay, so in Saudi Arabia, there's a lot of paperwork, fake paperwork that can get done. Like you can get you want a bachelor's, you want a master's, you want a PhD, no problem. You'll find someone who'll make these fake papers and you'll get it.
Yeah.
So I don't know why I didn't think of that while I was there, because I knew a ton of people who were doing that. So I thought, I'll do it the right way, you know.
Yeah.
Allah's watching me. I can't fear Allah the right way, obey the ruler. And so I'm stuck though. And then so she manages to get some fake paperwork for her that says she's employed. So it brings me over on a visitor's visa. And then so I can go back. Okay. And so that's the only way that I was able to go back. And I do end up going back in that time. And things have already gotten pretty bad with the first wife because she's still, you know, she's not having it with this whole thing of having a second wife. And I can understand. When I get there though, because I didn't get the approval, I can't work at that place that I was hired. And so I have to take odd teaching jobs, teaching English. So I teach at the center, teaching some Saudi kids. I teach at IKEA in the department to help the employees who can't understand the expatriates who only speak English. So I teach them a class. And then I'm having all kinds of people, you know, when you get there, they're like, don't worry, Akhi, I got you. We're going to help you. And so all these promises and all these people who said they're going to help me. Another one said he was going to help me get in the Islamic University. And it doesn't happen. You know, it's just, things are just falling apart. Things are falling apart back home with my first wife. Things are kind of falling apart with the second one as well. And I'm like, you know, what the hell did I get myself into? You know, like you're trying to follow the sunnah. You're trying to follow the deen, right? And you see that it's just, it feels more fairy tale-ish. It doesn't feel real in that sense. Like everything you read in the books doesn't happen in real life. And so at the same time, I'm also starting to have more doubts as we're starting to go over a lot of these things in detail. I'm getting in Saudi Arabia, you always get books, you always get tapes, you're going to these study circles and you start hearing a lot of stuff you didn't know about or things that you get a better perspective on. And so I start to see above and beyond the Salafiyah of Sheikh Al-Albani and Jabali and all them back in America and start to see the Salafiyah of Saudi Arabia and how it works and seeing the Salafiyah in Egypt. And you start to realize this doesn't feel like they're all the same because each country has this different way in which they practice their Salafiyah. To some extent, there's some similarities, but I just started to see culturally just different things. And it was really, it was taking its toll as far as understanding, belief and things like that. I'm not talking about seeing the Muslims doing bad things. That didn't affect me because it was never an issue for me because I thought, well, that's between them and Allah.
Yeah.
About in the area of specialist discourse, hearing things about Tawheed, hearing things about Allah, hearing things about the Prophet that you never really are given up front. And so you start to hear it, and so you start to say, wow, this is different. So I guess it was kind of like a culture shock Islamically, another to see a Muslim majority country, especially Saudi Arabia, totally different now. And there's the Khawarij, the Takfiri type jihadi guys will say Saudi Arabia is not a Muslim country, but there are a lot of elements of Sharia that are there, and you see that.
Yeah.
And even though that I have to say that Saudi Arabia itself, my biggest problem was not the people. The people are amazing. The country is beautiful. The culture, the language. Saudis. They're really great people. To be honest with you, I really enjoyed just the way they are. They reminded me a lot of being Latino. It's just the one thing that I started to see was that religion was the big problem. And I came to this conclusion there. The only difference between Saudi Arabia and America is that in Saudi Arabia, they sin in private, and in America, we sin out in the open. That was the only difference, really, to be honest with you. Humans are humans. And that started to really click. And I think that's where I started to say, okay, this is getting different for me. Reality check is coming in. Okay, so now we're done with Saudi Arabia. I don't know if you want to ask anything about that before we move on.
No, we're good.
We're good? Okay. So in Saudi Arabia, some things pop off. Unfortunately, I get into it with the first wife, get into it with the second wife, and I just decide that I'm going to go back home to the States. Things are not working out in Saudi Arabia, and things aren't working out with the first wife. So I divorce both of them. And I say, shit, where am I going to go? And I say, well, only place I can go is back home to El Paso. And I get back home, newly divorced from 2 wives. I'm single again. And my mom's like, you know what, son, you've been through a lot. Why don't you just come back and stay with me, and you can help. You can stay with me and decide what you're going to do, and then, I support you whatever you decide. And so I said, okay, I go back to El Paso, and I said, you know what, I really loved being in Saudi Arabia. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get a bachelor's degree. Why not get a bachelor's degree, and then I can go back and stay there. And that was the plan. Go back, bachelor's degree. Even though I had my doubts, I was fighting it, and I was pushing it back. Saying my istiyada, a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Absolutely staying over and over again. His shaitan's whispering to me, not realizing this is my inner thoughts that are talking, and not a human being that I can't see.
Not a supernatural being, devil, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And what happens with me and my mother, we redevelop our relationship.
Oh, nice.
In Salafiyah, there's this concept of al-wala wal-bara. You disavow the al-wala is loyalty to Muslims, disavowment to the non-Muslims. And even though you're supposed to respect your non-Muslim parents, you're supposed to love the Prophet more than your own parents. And that was very hard for me, being Latino, to I have to love this Prophet more than my mother, who raised me and who took care of me and did everything for me.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, Abdullah, being Salafi, I developed that mentality where, my mother's not Muslim. And so I separated myself from her for a while. So there was some years we went without really being close.
Oh, yeah.
And it was all tied to religion, because I couldn't celebrate Christmas. I couldn't, be around drinking. I couldn't.
Yes.
All these things,
Yes.
And so I wanted to be a good Muslim. I wanted to obey Allah, obey the Prophet. And so I stayed away from them. And that put a strain on our relationship. And so now back home, I'm, developing again with my mother. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I'm starting to really, as when I talk to her, because I'm thinking I'm giving her dawah. My mother has, my mother to not be somebody who, my mother finished high school, and she's educated in the sense that she got a trade, and she's very intelligent with numbers. but my mother's just not into religion. She's not into philosophy. But she had these things that she would tell me about religion that I didn't want to accept at the time that would later soak in. And just her views about hell. Like, my mother doesn't believe in hell. She doesn't think there's a place called hell. She's like, there's no, and she doesn't believe God punishes. She believes in God, but she's like, why would God punish? That's stupid. Mm. And there are many other things that, started to affect me as I started talking more to my mom. I'm giving her dawah, and in reality, she's giving me dawah, right? And so I start rethinking Salafiyah, and I'm like, you know what? I don't know if I can. Let me just stop saying Salafi this, Salafi that. This commercialization of the word, and let me just focus on Aqidah. Let me just believe in Allah, and that's it. I'll be good, right? So, Aqidah wise, I believe in Allah. I don't need to be calling myself Salafi no more. I still believe in it. It makes sense, but right now, I'm just gonna say I'm Muslim. This is around 2013. This starts happening to me. Okay, and I'm going to school, mind you. I'm doing my associate's degree, going into a bachelor's. And by that time, I think I probably almost memorized 15 ajza of the Quran, roundabout. So maybe a little bit less than half of the Quran or around that time. And I'm constantly going over it. And, now that there's context to when I recite and I understand it, it's just still not sitting right. It's just like, oh, man, some of this stuff, like Surah Al-Bayinah, that the last verses of the Quran, those last 2 or 3 verses, the calling the non-Muslim Sharul Bariya, the worst of creation, and then yes. Non-Muslims Khairul Bariya, the best of creation. These things are just like, wow, why would a God who created you, call you that? It just doesn't make sense. So let me just look at my notes real quick. I was fighting these ideas. A note here: the evolution, issues of language, philosophy, and other religions. I'm still fighting them, saying, those are all false and those are wrong. And had to take like biology 1 and biology 2, learn about evolution, learn philosophy. I had to take a couple of philosophy classes. And it was the first time where I met a philosophy teacher who, there was this book I wish I would have kept, but he didn't. He was teaching the fallacies of reasoning. And he had a section where they have verses of the Quran and where the fallacy occurs in the verses of the Quran.
Really?
Yeah, and I was like I was really pissed. Like I was like, astaghfirullah, how can he doesn't understand Arabic? He doesn't know Islam. Who is he to say all these things?
That's so Islamophobic. That would we never get away with that today.
Yeah. Well, it was in the textbook.
But I'm saying, like, our textbook would be like scratched up, ripped out. Yeah. People would say I'm offended. The teacher would be fired.
and I didn't think in those days. I just didn't care. I was like, let the kuffar be the kuffar, and I'm my own person. But it would later sink in, But I had never seen that a response to the Quran in that way.
That's
what they call fallacy. It's like, fallacy? What?
I would love to see that book. That'd be so cool.
And I wish I could remember what it was, but
yeah,
I didn't keep it.
It was a book on philosophy, like a textbook.
Yeah, it was a philosophy textbook. I was taking I had to take like a philosophy 1 and a 2 class.
Yeah, those like intro philosophy is great, like logical fallacies and
that
stuff is like everybody should know that, right?
And you as a Salafi, you're not exposed to that stuff. Like philosophy is haram.
Oh.
Even
they call it kalam. They call it kalam, right?
Well, falsafa would be taking actually from like Aristotle, Socrates, and stuff.
Okay.
Al-kalam would be rhetoric, like the Asharis and them.
Okay.
Based off of the influences of falsafa.
Yeah, it's interesting talking, just to quickly add to this. When I was taking a class with Muhammad al-Sharif, who is this Egyptian Canadian that, he founded Al-Maghrib, and he was explaining how the Quran responds. Like, I took his class called Fiqh Dawa, and for example, he would say the non-Muslims would say something like they'd make some accusation, right? And the Quran would just repeat it back to them. You're only a man. So they say you're only a man. Like, it doesn't even respond to the actual allegation. Just like, yeah, just say it back to them. That's the answer. And I was like thinking at the time, like, oh, clever. Just say it back to them. But that doesn't, like, you're not actually making a point when you do that. You just like, they say he's only a man. Like, it's kind of funny, but the Quran actually doesn't make good. In many cases, it's not actually making an argument. It's just kind of ignoring it or just accepting and just brushing over it or whatever. So yeah, it'd be really interesting to see that. One more thing before we jump forward. So you memorized half the Quran?
I don't want to say half. I mean, like 14, 15 ajza that I remember.
Okay.
And I had always had a hard problem with hifz, like doing muraja revision. I'd always have a problem. But for what I remember of when I had actually started to count what I knew, and it was never in order. I always went based off of like maybe a chunk from Surah Al-Baqarah, or maybe a chunk from Surah Al-Ma'idah or something like this, and just go in different ways. Or I'd start from the back and do Juz Amma, and then just Tabaraka, and keep going backward and go other way. Just I always did just weird ways of memorizing it because I just couldn't find myself organized to do it. There's two ways you can do it. You either start from Fatiha and Baqarah and go all the way down, and then some do it the other way. They go Juz Amma and go all the way back. So I've seen those two methods. And for me, I was like, how about those of us who just want to go through different parts of it? Because it's like organized it was just something that my brain couldn't focus on.
But that's a lot. I mean, you obviously, that means you put in a lot of time into this.
Well, yeah, I mean, there would be days that I would sit there for 2-3 hours memorizing and going over what I memorized. And then I would even like sit down and highlight and make sure I understood. Like I had a mushaf where I would, like, this one isn't one of them, but oh yeah, there is some. So there would be like areas where I would, highlight and mark because maybe when I would hear it, I didn't understand it. So I would go back and make sure that when I heard it again, I understood it and could contemplate the meanings, or I wanted to look up the reason why it was revealed. So I would do all kinds of stuff. So yeah, I would say, yeah, but the Quran itself is a very difficult book to memorize. People who memorize it and retain it, hats off to them. It's a pretty difficult book to memorize. How many people say it's easy? No, it's not. It's not easy to memorize.
It's a lot of hours and it's a lot of repetition. There's a lot of similar verses, a little bit different. But I think most people don't do it the way you do it. Like they're not looking at the meaning. They're not trying to understand it. They're just like doing it for hours and hours and hours and hours, repeating over and over and over again. Like, obviously the way you were doing it would take a lot longer because you're actually putting effort into understanding too. So that's missing in most cases. Like most people I know memorize the Quran, they have no idea what they've memorized.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. That's why you can memorize the Quran. Some people can do it in 2 years and some can do it in 4. And there's a program that you follow to do that. But like I said, I just didn't feel right memorizing the whole thing and didn't even know what I was saying. Like, what use am I memorizing? It's like memorizing a book in like some other language that's not my language. But so this is why I went back to learn Arabic and to understand it, to get a better understanding of what's recited. And this is what makes it hard today, even though I love hearing different Qur'an, different reciters. Like I said before, when I'll hear something, I'll be like, oh my God, like I can't believe that. Like, oh, why did the Prophet say that? Or like, what was going on? And you go and find out in Hadith why he wrote that verse, So I guess it was a curse, because for those who learn the meaning, they just stay happy the Quran. And when
those that don't learn the meaning, you mean?
Yeah, those that don't learn the meaning.
Don't learn the meaning, yeah.
Hey, they're just like a parrot. They're just reciting, and they sound beautiful. But for those of us who go back and really want to contemplate it, some of us, not everybody, but some of us are like, shit, what is going on? What is this about?
The thing is, too, I do find that there's different types of personalities and there's different inclinations in people. And there are people that are naturally curious, learning. And a lot of times converts fall into this category because they're already willing to reconsider their beliefs. So you obviously became Muslim out of genuine belief that this was true, but you had a way of doing it. Whereas someone that's kind of born Muslim doesn't necessarily have that same initiative or drive to like, it's just like, something they just accept as true. Maybe they just grew up with it or whatever. Yeah. But in my case, I accepted it. In your case, you accepted it, on some certain conditions, so that, that continued to take you to the point where eventually you left it. Whereas the people that they're just memorizing, they might be doing it because their parents want them to do it. It might be like, it's a status symbol. I mean, sorry to say that, but like you become like the star of the family. Everybody is like introduced, all your family members are introduced that this is a hafiz in the family. Oh, mashallah, he's the hafiz. Oh, such pious. You guys are such good parents. I remember one of my cousins, his dad is like, he's now his dad's now atheist,
Oh,
but
really?
like the same dad was forcing his son to memorize Quran while he was sitting there watching basketball on TV. But like that, as non-religious as you can get, even before he left Islam, yet his kid is memorizing the Quran because it's like a cultural thing. Like everybody in the Pakistani community or the Indian community, Muslims, they just tend to get the kids to want to do it, even when there's no understanding behind it. It's just like, you got to memorize the Quran. It's as important to them as like the schoolwork for the kids, not for them necessarily. I'm not talking about the religious parents necessarily. I'm talking about the ones that they're like culturally Muslim, but still hifz is so important to them.
Yeah, it's weird, and you're right about that, the whole superstar thing. Like, you're a Hafiz man, you're a superstar, you know. And I feel bad because I've seen a lot of the Hufad, a lot of people who memorize the Quran. Once they make a mistake or do something wrong, like, that's a lot of pressure, you know. Like I know there was a father that I knew. He sent all of his sons to Pakistan to memorize, and his oldest son, he struggled. He memorized the Quran, but one day they found him outside smoking, and everybody was like, you know, Astaghfirullah, he's smoking. And it's like his whole reputation was smeared just by the fact that he's smoking. Now, I don't know if he's smoking marijuana or even if it's just tobacco, but whatever it was, just that pressure that you have to be constantly thought of as somebody holy or somebody who can do no wrong, when in reality these kids, and they grow up to be older, they're just human beings like everybody else. Like, damn, that's a lot of pressure.
It's the same thing with hijab. A lot of Muslim women have that same issue, that anything they do wrong, like smoking, everybody will jump on them. You're wearing hijab and you smoke? Like, astaghfirullah. Or if they're not wearing hijab, astaghfirullah, you're not wearing hijab? Like, it's like, you can't win. Yeah, you can't win. But especially when you do wear the hijab, you suddenly become this walking, you know, example of Islam, and you're expected to uphold all of these requirements that maybe you don't necessarily want to. But unfortunately now, and on top of it, with hijab, there's also the other downside, which is you get targeted as like this example of Islam, whereas who knows, some of those Muslimas might not even be Muslim. They're just wearing hijab because they have to, but they might get, like, you know, hate attacks and, you know, bigoted abuse and stuff like that. So yeah, it's unfortunate. And the same thing I think applies to being a hafiz, like you said, that you just put up you idolize in such an extent that, you know, now it's like you have to live up to that. You know, it's unfortunate.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll go into that time where I'm still doing my bachelor's, and there's a relationship that I want to mention here because I think it's very important to talk about it. So there was, while I was in Riyadh, I used to have this blog called the Ajurumiyya blog. It was about the Ajurumiyya text, which is a very famous small booklet on Arabic grammar. And it was kind of popular among the Salafis, and they would go to it. And I used to get all kinds of questions from people all the time. And there was this one younger lady, an adult, I don't mean a little girl, so nobody can say, hey, naughty. But she was of course of age. She was about 13 years younger than me, and she was from London, East African. And we're going to call her, I'll give her a nickname. We're not going to call her real name for privacy, but we're going to call her Arawelo. Okay, that's her nickname. And she would email me in Riyadh and say, you know, ask me questions about grammar, and I would answer her. And
wait, hold on. She was in Riyadh?
No, she was in London, and she would email me while I was in Riyadh.
So wait, you finished your bachelor's, or you went back to the...
I'm telling you how we first met.
Oh, from before.
Yeah, I would get
okay, you're going back to...
Yeah, I would get emails from her, and she'd ask me questions about Arabic grammar and stuff, and I would help her, right? And then one time she emailed me, and she would be like, I'm looking for a husband. Can you help me find a husband there that would help me make hijrah? And I was like, okay, well, what are you looking for? And then she told me, and I would be like, you know, I don't know anybody like that. And of course, I had 2 wives. I really wasn't going to go try to take the third. These two beat the hell out of me. So I was like, no. And it didn't even cross my mind, to be quite honest. I wasn't even thinking about it because I was so much hell that I caught. People think that polygyny is so easy. It may be for some men who might have money, but when you don't, it's really difficult. And pleasing two women, and we're not talking about sex, we're talking about just the mindset. It's really impossible. Really impossible.
It's tough for sure. Yeah.
So fast forward, when I'm in El Paso doing my degree, she reaches out to me out of the blue because I'd hear from her every now and then, right? And she's like, "How are you doing? How are things going?" And yes, it is. And she says, "You know, what's going on?" I was like, I'm not married anymore. You know, I got divorced and I'm back in the States. And she's like, "Oh, really?" I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Oh," and she's like, so we start talking, and she's like, "Well, are you considering remarrying?" And I'm like, "No, not really. I'm just trying to get my degree and get back to Saudi Arabia." And so I didn't really see where it was going, right? She starts plugging in and said, "Well, would you consider marrying somebody of a different culture, blah, blah, blah." And I tell her, you know, you qualify, you're East African, and most of my wives have been black. So there's no problem there. And then so she just comes out, "Would you consider us talking for marriage?" And I was like, "Yeah, why not?" And so we start talking and getting to know one another. She tells me that her brother will reach out to me. It never happens. And so through this time, gradually, we start developing.
I'm laughing because you're not supposed to talk, right? As Muslims, it's supposed to be a third party.
From the father or somebody, uncle or somebody, and then you can talk, right? In most cases, that's what happens. And that doesn't happen. Feelings develop. We could, start talking a lot. And then, she asked me if I want to go see her in London. And I thought, hey, well, this would be the time. I'll go to London, meet the dad, meet the family, and man, we'll be straight. And I go to London, and that's not what happens. Unfortunately, we end up, well, I don't say unfortunately because there's nothing unfortunate about our relationship. Yeah. I'm not ashamed of it at all. Yeah. We end up being together, being intimate. And in my case, I thought, falling in love with her and thinking eventually we'll get married. Maybe, because she had her first marriage didn't go very well. It was very hard for her. And so I overlooked that, and again, I'm getting more and more liberal, as you can see, obviously now doing something out of my comfort zone. And
I just want to say something that this is such a human thing to do, and that happens all the time.
Right.
Highly religious individuals will put aside those things because of natural human feelings. That feeling of love is or sexual attraction is so powerful that it overrides everything else.
Yeah.
Right? Like you will die. I mean, sometimes you're willing to die for that. I mean, that's not necessarily rational, but the point is that it's such a human experience of like this, what you're describing to me, that I'm actually not surprised that this happened. But anyways, to continue.
Yeah. So we developed this type of relationship. And I don't want to say it was just sexual. Abdullah, there was a real bond between us.
Yeah, love, right?
Oh, well, on my side, later on.
On your side.
On my side, I would find out later on that she didn't. We would do this for like off and on throughout that time I'm in El Paso getting my bachelor's. We would go off and on, being together, not being together. And I went another time to London as well. I had the opportunity to go study. And so I did a summer session, and I was in London and in Paris. And then I was with her again in that time. And I had applied to the University of Westminster because the idea then was starting to change. It was, okay, well, why not go for a master's after my bachelor's? And then I'll really be set in Saudi Arabia, right? And then I'll marry Arawelo, and we'll go together, happy couple, and go to Saudi Arabia together. But while I did get accepted, the scholarship didn't come through. And I wasn't going to stay in London, just really expensive. And I was like, no, this isn't going to work. I'm not going to be able to do that. And luckily I had applied for another school to do my master's and got accepted there to teach and to do my master's. And the only thing was that I would have to leave El Paso and go to Minnesota. And so what ended up happening was when I was there in London, she's like, don't leave, stay here, and we'll get married. And I was like, no, I can't do that. I'm not going to risk being out here in London. I'm not even a citizen. And so I made the decision to leave. She came to the United States for something in one part of the East Coast, and I saw her briefly. We were together again, and then after that, we kind of like just broke up. She was like, I was like, I know we're not gonna get married, and I know things are gonna work out, and it just seems you don't love me. And she didn't deny it, so I was like, okay, well, cool. I mean, hey, that's my fault, but hey, that's just the kind of person I am. I love very hard, and I'm very loyal. Unfortunately, not when I took a second wife like a dumbass, but I am naturally one who's very loyal in a relationship. So we did that for about 4 years, and I mentioned this relationship for a reason, because as a Muslim, that relationship caused me to relax my views on how I saw sex. Okay. And it also was a driving factor to, it really ridded this idea of misogyny that I had, right? It was like, if men can sleep around, why can't women? Why are women demonized when they sleep around? And so my mindset started to change because of our relationship. Like, I would have never called her, a whore or you're a slut. Never. Why? And so my mind was changed. It was like, she's not a slut. She's not a whore. We slept together. So what? Who cares? We were two consenting adults and we did this. And so my view was, I was really shocked. I was like, wow, I am starting to see sex in a very different way. That's not in my, in the past 27, 28 years as a Salafi would have definitely been not only haram, but it could have been the death of me in a Muslim country, when you apply Sharia. Because, if you've had sex out of marriage, you still receive, the had of being killed, stoned to death, al-rajam. So to me, marriage just became like a title. It was just like, I just didn't see it nikah anymore as like this thing where Muslims, they hype it up so big, and I just started to see it as, oh, it's nonsense. Like, two people can be together without a marriage certificate and it'll be just fine.
You know what's funny? Muslim scholars say that they actually brag about this. They say, when someone was asking once in an Islamic finance seminar, how is it that interest is haram, but this other thing that looks like interest is not haram, like some Islamic financing model? And the sheikh was like, and this is Sheikh Abu Tawfiq Al-Chaudhry, and he was like, not Abu Tawfiq Al-Chaudhry. He's like, listen, how when you have a man and a woman and they're not related and sex is haram? And everyone's like, yes. And how once you have nikah, now sex is halal? And everyone's like, yeah. See, it's just like that. It's haram, now it's halal. It's just how it is. It's like, it's just a contract, but apparently it makes halal. So you're right. It's silly, right? And I totally agree with you that marriage, it's, anyways, we won't get down that.
Yeah. We could be talking for hours about that. Marriage is something else.
Yeah.
Okay, so graduate with my bachelor's, and I've already, I had done these schools. Didn't work out for the school in London, and I go to Minnesota. I said, I'm going to go to Minnesota and do my master's. So I'm going into my early 40s now and decide it's time to go to Minnesota. And so this is going to transition from 2016 to 2018. And so, I'm brokenhearted by Arauelo. It kind of took its toll on me, and I'm like, shit, things happen. And so I start my master's program. I'm teaching at the same time, and there's this Latino brother who I met when I was years ago. I translated for him for a brother he had a publishing company that I translated for. So he used to take care of him because the brother was sick, and so his wife is Somali, and so they left New York to go to Minnesota where she used to live. And so he would say to me before I got there, from leaving El Paso to Minnesota, he'd say, "Hey man, there's this really good sister that I think would be good for you." Right. And I really was like, I don't know. Like, he didn't know that I was starting to change. But at the same time, I started saying, okay, maybe this is a sign. Maybe I need to get back to, being hard again, right? Like this is where you start to default to think that way. And I said, but it was like two sides fighting each other. And I was like, man, I don't know. And so I kind of went with it a little bit, I didn't see a picture of her because she wore niqab and wouldn't send a picture, but I sent some pictures of me, and I should have known, because I started to trim my stuff. Back in the day, if you saw me, I had full beard, so I started to trim it off. And she said to him to ask me, where's the rest of my beard? So when I heard that was a sign that I should have, it was like a big red flag, like, Tomas, like, what are you doing? I ask him, is she extreme? And he's like, no, she's not. And I didn't mean extreme like jihadi extreme. I meant extreme in the sense like she's to the letter following Kitab wa Sunnah.
Yeah.
Because if she is, then there may be some problems. He's like, nah, don't worry about it. She's not like that. She's very open-minded. And she's got a bachelor's degree herself. And she's just divorced. She has some children, some girls. So I said, okay. And then I changed my mind. I was like, nah, forget it. And so I make the drive to Minnesota. And once I'm in Minnesota and I'm in doing my thing, me and him see each other a lot. And he's like, man, you got to. She really, I think you guys would hit it off. And he says to me, and I know he's playing, he's like, man, if you don't marry her, I will. And I was like, go ahead. See what happens. Your Somali wife ain't going to have that. So I said, okay, look, shit. I'll let us just meet, let us start talking and let's see. And so we talk, and she's, she's just really, really different. And she's also East African, different East African, meaning from a different area and different culture from East Africa, but we connect. And I hate to sound cliche, but like I said with my first wife, it was kind of love at first talk, and then we schedule time to see each other with the brother and his wife in her apartment. And when I see her, I'm just like, okay, I think we'll be all right. And I kind of mentioned, do you mind that I'm not as practicing? She's like, do you still believe in Allah? Do you still pray? And I was like, yeah, I still believe in Allah. I still pray. And she's like, don't worry about it. Everything else will be fine. And I'm like, okay. So I'm like, we'll do this. And she's, just a reminder, she's about 12 years younger than me. Okay. So the age gap was also kind of an issue, but at the same time, it wasn't. This is the thing though, with our arrangement though, which I think really helped us last, is that because I live 1.5 hours from the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, I'm in a town called Mankato. We decided not to move in together right away. We'd just be married and then see each other on the weekends, because I was teaching and going to school, and she was doing things with her girls and with school. I mean, with working in a school. And so that really kind of helped with things. And that distance is kind of what was good, because what ended up happening was not that much long after we got married. Something happened. My ex-wife got sick, the one I have kids with, and the kids had to come with me, and I had to take care of them while she was going through her thing. And so I had my 3 kids, she has her kids, and it works out just fine. We had a very balanced, and it was a very, I have to say, I was very happy with the marriage. There's nothing I can complain about her. She's, perfect in the sense of just sweet, kind. We love to cook together. We love to just read, talk, whatever. We just bonded, like it was very rare for me to have it like that. And so I thought, wow, man, this is something from Allah. So she decides that she wants me to start teaching her more Arabic. She knew Arabic, but she wanted me to teach her more. And so that means that I have to start getting back to going over what I memorized and, going through my books and stuff. And so I start to here and there teach her. And it's here where, as I go back to reading, we're at a Muslim bookstore, and I think I have it. We're at a Muslim bookstore, and because she wanted to do Quran, so I was like, okay. And so when I would recite Quran, I wanted to start getting better understanding of why these verses were coming around. And I said, okay, let me look at some tafsir books in Arabic. And I started asking the guy, the keeper, what bookkeeper, where's the books on tafsir? And so he has this section in Arabic. And I find, this is the actual book that I bought, Asbab Nuzul by Suyuti. Okay, so Asbab Nuzul is the reasons why verses of the Quran were constructed. Okay.
Oh, Asbab Nuzul.
Asbab Nuzul, right? So
okay, yeah.
This is Suyuti's book, okay?
Okay.
Suyuti is a great scholar of tafsir from Egypt. Asyut is in Egypt. And I find this book, and I'm like, okay, I've heard of Suyuti. I've heard a lot of different things about him, but I never actually read a book from him in this case. So I get the book, and as you can see, it's kind of thin, not that big. And I start reading it and going through it, and I finish it like in about a month. And as you can see all my marks and everything. It's all highlighted in all the different sections of things that I start to read and see. and I'm seeing things, and I'm like, oh my God, like I'm seeing stuff that you're not told all the time, right? Like just some like really crazy things. And what I noticed with Suyuti is he continues to mention Al-Wahidi. Okay, Al-Wahidi is constantly mentioned. I'm like, who is this Wahidi character? And then it clicks. Oh, I know who he's talking about, because we were warned against Al-Wahidi when I was hardcore Salafi. Al-Wahidi was Ashari. So Al-Wahidi, great scholar of tafsir, hundreds of years before Suyuti, and Suyuti's quoting Al-Wahidi. Actually, in this book, he praises Al-Wahidi in the book as well. And I say, let me see what Al-Wahidi is all about. Let me go to Asbab al-Nuzul for him, right? And I get to Al-Wahidi's Asbab al-Nuzul, and I start to read it, and I'm like, damn, like there's some stuff in here that, Muslim. And so the problem with Asbab al-Nuzul and the tafsir works is, as you know, for the Salafis, is that most of the hadith they'll say are weak, right? That's the thing. Like when you read these things, oh, those hadith are weak. You got to stay away from that.
Yeah.
But I didn't really buy into that.
Yeah.
Because how can this be in the literature itself? How can we find some of these situations the Prophet was in?
Yeah.
And it's fake. It can't be. This has got to be.
Yeah.
Real.
And the stories actually, like the logical explanations for why you have some of these strange rulings in the Quran. One of the most weird examples is this li'an. When you mutually curse each other, the husband and wife.
Yeah.
And I have a video on my channel called the mutual cursing game or something, where when we go to the Asbab al-Nuzul for this verse, and it's hilarious. It's like, oh, if you need to have 4 witnesses. So some man goes to Muhammad and says, if I find my wife and she's doing it, I'm going to go find 4 witnesses or something. Like, he's mad, right? He's like, he's angry, right? And of course, Muhammad's like, okay, so then you can swear, and then she came and she's like, yeah, what if I swear too? Like, what if I'm innocent? And he's like, okay, you can swear too. So they're both like, and then he's like, okay, the 5th time you have to say the curse of Allah is on the liar or something. It's so comical. And it's like, you're right. It makes the thing look so very human.
Yeah, and that's what Asbab al-Nuzul does to me. This is when I start reading this book, and then I find Al-Wahidi's book, and I'm teaching my wife, and I'm like, as I'm teaching her stuff, I'm like, shit, I know the reasons. And then I find Tabari online, and Tabari's volumes in his tafsir, and I find other books of tafsir, and I'm like, God, like all of this is all of these things are happening, and I had heard about the satanic verses, what is known as Qissat al-Gharaniq, but the tale of the cranes. But I had always been told, there was a book by Sheikh Al-Albani that I had glanced over about it, and it was all one-sided. But when you start to look deeper into the story, it's just instances like that where he says these verses that are supposed to be from Shaitan, and then he takes them back. I mean, there's 3 popular views, but the third view is probably the most accurate, because the authentic view in Bukhari leaves out all of the important information about what happened. And so
Bukhari is the latest one. The earliest one has more details, right?
So Bukhari's version just says that the Quraysh, all the mushrikun, made sajda with the believers.
Yeah, they were impressed with what he said.
What happened? Where's the context to this? Why would they do that? And Sheikh Al-Albani tries to explain that away. The only way it makes sense, though, is when you go back to versions 2 and 3, because version 2 says he recites, and Shaitan came and just says the verses, right? And then the Quraysh heard it, and then the Prophet was like, "Hey, what's going on?" They're like, "Hey, Shaitan just said something." Verse 3 says the Prophet actually says it.
Version 3,
verbalizes it. It's there in the text. Verbalizes it, and then Jibril comes and is like, "Hey, what did you recite?" And he's like, "Reciting." And then the Prophet, that doesn't make sense. It's like, and then the Prophet's like, "Oh shit, I said these words, and I recant them." And so he comes out with another verse to abrogate it, right? And so you start to understand why nasikh wal mansukh, how it works, the abrogation of verses. It's like something goes wrong here, don't worry about it. We'll abrogate it with something else. Or, oh, I got caught with this, let me go and do this, right? I said one thing here, now I'm going to change it to something else. And so it's just a constant revision. And so Asbab al-Nuzul is like one of the many. I'm not going to say just Asbab itself, because then there's be people like, he lost his faith because of Asbab al-Nuzul. What's wrong with him? No, it's not just that, brother. It's more than that. This is just like one of the many things that were going on with me at that time. Okay, so Suyuti, Al-Wahidi, getting into Asbab al-Nuzul even more. I also noticed when I'm there's a Salafi masjid that she goes to, and that masjid is really like, being in Saudi Arabia, so one group of Salafis, this group of Salafis were like, and there was another Salafi masjid in Minneapolis, and this one was in St. Paul, and they were warring with each other. Well, this one particular group were younger guys, and they were following this one group of Salafis that I knew about, which I call the tabloid Salafis. The other group are called the conservative Salafis. They still just follow, Quran and Sunnah, and they're not on the Jarh wa Ta'dil thing, praising and
boycotting.
Yeah. So they're a lot leaner and just a little bit nicer.
Yeah.
And so I become hesitant again, with calling myself Salafi because of these types of things going on. So I'm just like, I'm still just cool with being Muslim, but I'm being affected by what I'm reading. But I'm not at that point yet where I'm saying, this is all nonsense, and I don't think I could believe it. I haven't reached that yet. And I want to make this clear, because what always happens, what I always hear people saying constantly when the ex-Muslim thing started to happen and it started to become big, it was always, to those who would talk about it, you just want to sin, you just want to sleep around, you just want to drink, you want to eat bacon, and that's a life world discourse that's talking about, something personal, right? Or maybe something bad happened. Someone got beaten in the madrasa or the duksi or something, and they have resentment.
Yeah, or their parents bad or whatever. Right?
And so what the ultra religious will say, see, that's because you didn't understand what was going on, right? You didn't. But for me, that wasn't the case. Like I said, I had been wronged by Muslims all the time. I wronged Muslims myself, and my thing was that sinning or any of that had nothing to do with leaving the religion. I was like, why would I do that? But it was specialist discourse. It was actually studying the Islamic text that drove me to lose my faith. It wasn't, this other stuff there. And also one thing that I have forgotten to mention was when I was doing my bachelor's, I had done a lot of, I did like 3 or 4 undergrad classes in Jewish studies. And this teacher, he is a really great teacher, a professor, he turned me on to this, and I didn't know about this with Jews. We have off the minhaj, they have what is called off the derek. Okay.
Really?
Yeah, and it's about like the Haredi Jews, that's equivalent to us Salafis. They're those Jews, the Hasidim, the Haredis, who leave the faith and become agnostics and atheists, and so they have their own community as well. And when I was exposed to that, I fought it. I was like, oh, that's crazy. Those Jews are crazy, right? But it started to make sense later on, like when I saw Muslims doing, just talking about ex-Muslims and stuff. So I just want to say, as I'm going down this journey, because we're coming now to the parts of where I'm losing faith, that for me it was never a life world discourse experience. It was a specialist discourse. It was the Islamic text itself, the religion itself, is what made me start to have these doubts. Okay, I want to make that clear. Not about sinning. Okay. Things start to not make sense now. The concept of hell, talking with my mother and how hell and all this, these start to sink in as I start to see how humanized the descriptions of hell are. Like now, when we talk about, the chains and all the things that are going to happen to you, those are like, so they're old. Like, why would you would think if Allah is all knowing, he would give some updated ways of torturing in hellfire, right? There would be something that we could go like, damn, but like now you think people in chains and stuff, and it's like,
yeah,
tearing the mouth and ripping it, and then it comes back and being burned, and then your skin grows back. It just seems so like, man, these are the words of a human being. Like I'm just starting to see that as my Arabic has gotten to this level.
So you notice that in the Arabic?
Yeah, I'm seeing it in the Arabic. When I recite Surah Ar-Rahman, it sounds to me. There was a time when I was reading it, and I'm like, this sounds like somebody from that century contemplating the world around him. Like, what if we would have taken the Prophet to like Jamaica or to the Caribbeans, and he would have been like, Jannah, this is what Jannah probably looks like, right? It's like the descriptions of paradise are like of somebody who lives in the desert, who has not seen. I mean, there are beautiful places in Saudi Arabia. Don't get me wrong. There's some areas with a lot of vegetation and it's beautiful. But the majority of it, like if you've been like deep in the desert of Saudi Arabia, you're like, damn, this is like desolate. You could kind of understand how you make those human connections with the expressions in the Quran, with how the Prophet may have experienced life. And this is why the Quran is expressed in that way, because he's expressing it as an Arab in his time. And that makes sense when you start reading the Quran, when you start seeing it that way, because in other instances, it's very hard to put that in context. Like heaven and hell today, like that's not a hellfire that I would be torturing people in a totally different way if I was that type of person.
Yeah.
Okay, so then I in the Shahadas, I start doing more studies on Tawheed, and I start to realize, and I have a video up that I posted yesterday on the binary of the Shahada. You could look at that and you can see where I'm going with where I see the Prophet as a dual persona, a law of his imagination, and then the Prophet persona or personality, where he's worshipped as the Prophet, not literally worshipped, but the idea of him being the best. Khairul Anam is what he's called. He's the best of those that are created. So he's like got this superstar status, and that comes from his idea of thinking, I'm a prophet, and I have this duty that Allah has given to me.
So before you continue, I'm just going to remind people that Aboo Imran Al-Mexici does have a channel, a YouTube channel. He has a blog as well called Off the Manhaj. And you can take a look. Do check out his other, he's going to be uploading videos from time to time on his channel. Some of his videos go into a lot more detail. Like we're focusing on the personal journey here, but he's done a lot of stuff on Salafism in particular, and going into a lot more detail. So if you're interested in that, do check that out. And there's articles. You had an article as well that was you mentioned in the notes about ex-Muslims, and sorry, I missed. Oh yeah, you have an article on CEDA called "Ex-Muslims Are Not an Authority on Islam." So I'll link that as well if people want to check that out.
Oh yeah, there's also another one. You'll see why I'm going to mention it as well.
Okay.
At the end of the story. But there's another one that CEDA. That one was published last year, 2019, and then this year they published my other article. Will My Daughter Still Love Me Tomorrow? A reflection on
yeah, I love that one. Yeah.
So that one is also there for anybody who wants to read it and give feedback, comments, whatever. Getting back though here, because we're almost winding down, I have some notes where I'm talking about, as I do more research in my master's degree, and I start to finish up my master's. My field is in applied linguistics, and so the issue of language and the issue of discourses, and there's some overlap in areas of evolutionary biology. It causes me to realize how human the Quran is, right? And this is where I finally give up. Like I'd fought my undergrad, with biology's bullshit, evolution. But here it's like with language, like it's like really plain and clear when it comes to the origin of language, which is still disputed. When it comes to like all of the different language families, the Quran, the claims of the Quran itself it's problematic as you start to go into these fields. And so,
I know we don't have time now, but I'd love for you to write a little bit more, or maybe make a video on how this study on linguistics that you did in university, how that affected your world, your view of the Quran.
Yeah, definitely. I do plan to do that. I do plan on doing that. I have some videos that I've even started. I have that one video on, is the Quran poetry?
Oh, nice.
It's just I'll check that out. Why to me it resembles poetry. And of course, you have a lot of people who did not like that. But I mean, it's my opinion. You don't have to take what I say.
Muhammad didn't like it either. He got rid of all the competition for his non-poetry.
Yes, we know how that went. Then I have noted here, which is tied to the language thing. The issue of the Quran being uncreated contradicts the hadith literature. And that's another thing that really bothered me. The Quran, the way it's worded, Al-Quran kalamullah, the Quran is the speech of Allah, wa huwa ghayru makhluq, and it's not created. And the one who says that it's created, he's a kafir, right? This is like what the ulama say.
Yeah.
But going into that thing of it not being created is like just really, really It just
How does it contradict the hadith? What do you mean? Like how it was revealed, you mean, and how it seems to like engage with the audience?
So if the hadith that talk about when Allah created, so the hadith goes, Allah created, let's see, I have it written down here. I'm not going to say the Arabic, I'm translating the Arabic. The first thing that Allah created was the pen. And he says to the pen, write. And the pen says, my Lord, what should I write? And he says, write the qadr of everything that will be created until the day of judgment, right? So if the Quran is not created, where was the Quran before the pen wrote it? Right? So these are just my thoughts. I'm not asking it's rhetorical, but this is the thoughts. Where was the Quran before it was written? So there's a contradiction there, right? With what the ulama are saying and then with what's in the hadith literature.
Yeah, that's puzzling. How was the Quran ever written if it always existed, right?
Right.
Because it can't be written because it always existed. So
right. So then how is it written? Maktub, how is it written then?
Yeah.
Maktub means something had to happen before. So,
and even then, like the Quran is describing things that happen in the world, which like it's weird. You're right. It's confusing.
It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense, basically.
I put here, Allah having a voice is unexplainable.
Allah having a voice?
A voice, a salt. They say Allah has a salt. He has a voice.
Oh, he has a voice.
Who hears that voice, right? Like this is where I really start to think.
Oh, okay.
A voice has to have sound. You have to have a mouth. You have to have a throat and lungs. But what does that sound like? And who heard it? Because if you think about it, the isnad of the Quran is the Prophet, Jibril, Allah. It's not Muhammad, Allah. There's always this intermediary person there. So he didn't hear Allah's voice. I mean, there are probably some hadith that would say he heard Allah. And some have said in the Isra wa Mi'raj that he could have heard Allah's voice. That gets into a whole lot of other stuff. But the point I'm trying to make is basically, what is that voice like? And I forgot to mention that some of these things that are coming to my head on my blog, if you look up, so I condensed all the articles. The Skeptics Corner, questions about Allah that Salafis are too scared to ask and understand. And so I have all the articles. Does Allah laugh? Does Allah have a foot? Does Allah have a face? Does Allah have eyes? Does Allah have hands? Some of Allah's negative attributes. Does Allah get angry? And so what's going on with me is like, okay, let's take like Allah laughing. How does that work? Okay, Allah's al-alim, he is all-knowing. Is it a genuine laugh? Because he knew something was going to happen. So how did and you're laughing, Abdullah, but no, these are like sincere questions that are going on in my mind, right? Like,
yeah.
Okay, Allah sees, the hadith is two Muslims fighting and Allah laughs. So I'm not saying for the Muslims out there, I'm not saying this is Allah. I'm just saying this, just think this.
Yeah.
Two Muslims are killing each other. That laughter. Was it a real laugh? Because he already knew they were going to fight.
Yeah. It's like watching a movie 100 times. It's like, okay, well,
I'm not
like,
laughing
okay.
anymore. Like, how genuine is that laugh? Or his being, surprised? How can Allah be surprised when he already knows it's going to happen? How does Allah get angry when he already knows things are going to happen?
I'm laughing because I'm so amazed by these questions, like how clever they are, and because I've never thought to this level, like Allah having lungs and a voice, and so when you say these things, I'm laughing because it's so absurd, and I'm kind of laughing at like how we don't think about these things, and when you actually dig into the details, then there's a lot of problems start to appear, right? But don't Ash'aris just say, well, hands means power, it means this and that. So there's no logical contradiction because everything can mean anything. It's unfalsifiable. And I have a video on there, is Allah object or substance, where I talk about the Salafi viewpoint versus the Ash'ari viewpoint, and just in a very brief way, nothing detailed. And you're right, because the Salafis accuse the Ash'aris of saying, well, then you're describing nothing. That's a nothing. It doesn't exist. Of course, but to be honest, as I started to get more into the Ash'ari viewpoint, there's some things I like about what they say that really counter the Salafis and make the Salafis look like mujassima, like Allah is a body. And you have to give the Ash'aris that, Don't get me wrong. I agree because I think Ash'aris
crazy stuff, but they
because Ash'aris are influenced by by philosophy.
Philosophy,
That's why it makes more sense, because if you go back to just the text, and the same thing happened with Christianity. The creeds and all of these things were founded because there's so much contradictory information that some of it just doesn't make sense. So then you need to make this logical. You need to make it make sense. You need to have some consistency. So that's why I think that's where the Nicene creeds and some of the other creeds came about, to make it easy to understand and logically consistent, right? It's the growth and the evolution of religion.
Yeah, I agree.
So no doubt, Salafism is the easiest to debunk because it's contradictory, right? It doesn't make any sense.
So much of it is just so hard to defend, and like, as you see my mind and these critical thinking questions that are developing, and I'm trying to ask people this, people stuck for like, you're going too far with this. And I'm like, this is my thing. How can I worship a God that I don't know, that I can't understand, right? He hasn't given us every information about himself. And that's even a problem saying himself, right? Because he has no gender. How can I worship that God? How can you tell me to worship something? So I've noted here the idea of ubudiyah, to me, it sounds like somebody from the 6th or 7th century viewing how to serve God. It's drawing from Hitchens, this desire to be a slave, right? To the ultra religious, especially the Salafis, are always talking about ibadah, ubudiyah, worshiping Allah, and it's like, this sounds like the idea of a man who's conceptualizing what he thinks God wants from human beings, right? He demands worship, then he burns you in hell if you don't obey him, like Hitchens said. That's crazy. These crazy ideas. Okay, so by 2018, I'm definitely losing faith, and I learn about ex-Muslims. And in the past, like I said in my first interview, when I talked about Mikael, people didn't leave Islam in that sense. They would just go back to Christianity. And it was very rare to see Muslims leaving Islam to become Christians. That was very rare. Like I said, we talked about this last time. But this is happening in big numbers now. And so you have ex-Muslims that are not just no longer saying that they're not Muslim and they're atheists and agnostics. You have also a lot of ex-Muslims are becoming Christian. And some, I think I heard of someone becoming Hindu. And I'm still waiting to see when someone becomes Jewish, which I would love to see. I mean, I don't care. It doesn't bother me, but
yeah. One of my good friends, Farhan Qureshi, is an ex-Muslim Hindu.
Oh, is he?
But he's more about philosophical Hinduism, like non-dualism, and you know what I mean. So yeah, he's a very, very cool guy, and I had my misconceptions as well until I spoke to him, and I'm like, me and you are almost the same. Like, honestly, other than the theism part, like, we agree on everything, like almost everything, despite the fact that he's a theist and I'm an atheist. But yeah, I do continue. So lots of people are becoming it's a idha jaa nasrullahi wal fath in reverse, right?
The other way around. Relax, it's the other way. So I come across this video. It's called Why I Left Islam. And everybody probably knows who I'm talking about. It's this heavenly voice. I don't see this man's face, but he is saying why he left Islam. And this man is saying everything that I've been thinking. Like, I'm thinking, like, how can this man know that? Like, how can he know these things? And I reach out to him. And if you don't know who I'm talking about, his name is Hassan Ridwan. And he gives me some really, really beautiful advice. And I write about that in that article that Sida reported, that published on, rather. And so by 2019, I sort it out and I say, I can't do it. Like in the middle of 2019, I can't really do this. But what do I do now about my wife, right? She's gonna know. I'm not praying. I'm not fasting. I'm not doing any of this stuff. It's just, it doesn't make any more sense to me. And I find solace in, secular humanism and agnosticism. At the end of the day, we're all atheists. So in a sense that I would have to say I'm an atheist because I'm anti-theist in the same way of this whole idea of a God. I am open to deism, but I just find that revelation and all that just goes out the door. Like maybe a God that created and then bounced, just left. That probably could work, but
deism.
The demands, demands worship and all of these human qualities, I can't. And so I say I have to be true to myself. And I say to her, I want to share some information. I want to share something. And I thought that because of how beautiful our relationship was, and like other people that I known in the past who were married, and one of the family, one of the husband's spouses leaves the religion and they still work it out. I know people who are like that. I thought, that will be okay,
like me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful example. And so by my birthday, I decide I'm going to come out to her, and I do, and I tell her. And what I really thought was going to be like, baby, it's okay, we're going to work this out, don't worry, I got you, was just, we're done. I can't be with you no more. Like, we can't be married. And I'm thinking, damn, like, really? Like, I've never really done you wrong. And it's like, never hit you, never, like, we have this beautiful thing. Like, why would that just, she's like, I've told you, I can't, I would not be true to myself. And I would have resentment because I know Allah would not be pleased with me being with a non-Muslim man. Or especially I was like, oh, you're just trying to be nice, but I'm, let's say what I am. I'm a murtad, I'm a mulhid, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we had never really moved in together. So it kind of worked out. I still had my own place and she had hers. So we just, come get your things and you can see your daughter whenever you want to see her. We have one child. And that's where I write about. Well, that's where that comes from. My thought, my fear, what's going to happen, because she's going to follow in Salafiyah. My other children they're Muslim, but they're not as religious. But with her, it's going to be different because the culture, the background, everything. She's going to grow up. Probably, I don't know. I don't know what to expect as far as niqab, and I know she's going to be wearing jilbab and hijab once she gets into puberty. Even before that, and so it's a really hard thing that happens to me. When we break up, and people tell her, you don't have to worry about a divorce because you're already divorced. She's a murtad, just you're done. And so that one was really hard for me, And strangely, oddly enough, Abuelo, out of the blue, just emails me and said, "How are you doing? How are things going?" And I told her, I'm divorced now. And she's like, "What happens?" And I shared with her, Abuelo, I'm not Muslim anymore. I can't believe. And she was just like, she's like, you know what? I'd never, stop talking to you. I'd never be like that to you, like, and that really, it really like touched me, like, that someone Muslim still could say that to me. She's like, if we'd ever gotten married, I would have never left you. And I was just like, wow, man, that's deep. So, how much time we got left? Okay, we got some good time. I want to talk about this. Just backtrack just a little bit, or not backtrack, but just right after we break up, and there's a good gap of time where I'm trying to get over my ex-wife, and then I meet a nice person, nice young lady as well. She's, I think, 15, 16 years younger than me. We'll call her Kosol Koro. Okay, we're not going to call her by her real name. Also East African, and we meet in 2020, the very beginning. And we have this really, really great relationship, okay? And the thing is, though, she doesn't know that I'm not Muslim anymore. But I never told her that I wasn't. She never asked, in other words. So, like, don't ask, don't tell, right? So, anything.
It didn't come up.
It didn't come up, right?
Yeah.
Didn't feel the need to. And what I love about Kosokoro, she doesn't wear hijab. She doesn't pray. She's not religious. Sex, drinking, we're just being two people, in love and together, and we enjoy each other's company, and she's not embarrassed of me, like with a lot of East Africans, and I'm gonna be specific here with Somalis, is that they have to hide their relationships if they're not married, right? Because there's some tribal stuff. Not all of them are like that, but with my experience in the past, it's been like that. But also Koro was like, you're my man. Like, she introduced me to her brother. Her mother knew. She was just like, she didn't give a shit. She didn't care what people said. Yeah. And that's what I loved about her a lot. And we would talk about a lot of stuff, man. We talk about God, religion, the meaning of life. I remember one time she was like, I don't even know why I believe. It's just because I was brought up this way. She's like, but I don't know. And so I'm like, okay, I can, I love this woman. Like, I think we'll be all right. Yeah. And so at the first, she's made it very clear, I don't want to get married. I don't want to marry you. And I was like, okay, that's fine. I don't want to marry you. And so we start talking about, she starts saying, okay, you know, I'm falling for you. Let's go ahead and move in together for a year or two. And then we could talk about being married. And I'm like, okay, let's do that. Yeah, I'm down with that. Let's move in and just be a couple, you know? And we talk about that, and she starts getting obsessive. Like all of a sudden she starts saying, we need to get married by next year. You need to marry me. And I was like, I started figuring maybe the family is, you know, trying to tell her something, friends. And we're taking a shower one time, and we're washing each other, and she tells me, you know, I used to be with a Latino guy. I was like, oh, really? You didn't tell me? She was like, yeah. So she's telling me the story, and I'm like, okay, tell me about him, baby. And she's telling me, and she says something like, yeah, he was nice, but I could never marry him. I was like, why? She's like, because he's not a Muslim. And I was like, but Kosokoro, you don't even really practice Islam. And she's like, I know, but I could never be with a Muslim guy. I was like, so, like, if I wasn't Muslim, you wouldn't be with me? And she's like, oh, no, I don't think that wouldn't work out. And I was just like, oh, shit. So, you know, my mind is like, okay, we're going down this like, I'm just having flashbacks of my ex.
Again, yeah.
I am not going to go down this route. I'm not going to get vested with somebody. We both obviously love each other. She's talking about moving in and married. We even talked about even having a kid. And it's like, then we do that. And then I say, baby, I'm not a Muslim no more. She's going to be like, fuck, get out. And so I'm back at the same shit. So I said, you know what? I decided, you know what? I'm just going to put a stop to it. I break up with her. She gets upset. And we break up, and she goes her way, and I go mine.
And that's just so unfortunate that, you know, this happens, that people are, you know, breaking up and over something that, like, obviously if, you know, you were together all that time, that wasn't an issue, but apparently it is an issue, which is, you know, kind of crazy. There was this tweet that, you know, this ex-Christian girl posted, says, I want to be loved and accepted for who I am and not what I believe. And I tweeted it, I retweeted it, because to me, it just makes perfect sense that this is how life should be, that we should be, you know, let me just share it on the screen for 1 second, because I think it's relevant. Yeah. It's just like, I want to be loved and accepted for who I am and not what I believe. And it's just, that's how life should be. That's how the world should be, not, you know, not based on, you know, group membership or group identity. Or so unfortunate, but, you know, that's why we're doing this. That's why we want to work on improving the world, so that people get past that point and, you know, will choose people based on merit, not based on group membership.
Religion.
You know? Religion. Yeah.
So, like in Islam, I was talking about before, now I'm in the no longer identify as being Muslim, and I lose a lot of friends, people that I've known for years stop talking to me. And oddly enough, like I mentioned about Somalis in the first interview, when I was Muslim, the Somalis are the ones that I was drawn to and that took me in. Same thing with Somali ex-Muslims. It's and because of where I'm at, I'm in Minnesota. I meet Somali ex-Muslims, and they become very open and accepting of me and take me in. Again, I've had some beautiful friendships with a lot of people, met a lot, even through emails. And it's just this thing that it just reminds me of how it's more human than has anything to do with beliefs, you know? Mm-hmm. So now, ending here, living single life, teaching full time this semester, teaching about 5 classes. I'm working on a second master's degree, and I finished my thesis in the summer, and I'll be presenting at a conference. A book of poetry that hopefully will be published once I'm finished, that talks about my time in Egypt, and doing videos on the blog, and just living without religion and living without that guilt that for almost the majority of my life I've lived with. And this first time where I'm living just for me and giving myself that meaning of life. I don't know where it's going to go. We'll see, Abdullah, what happens from here. But that in a nutshell, I was hoping we would get through it, is my story, at least for now. And if there's anything you want
That's
to add to that.
yeah. That was beautiful. Thank you for going to all of the ups and downs, and we obviously made many pit stops to reflect and discuss certain things. I think that personally, you're a wonderful person. I'm so glad I met you, and that's how we find each other. We find each other because we have this common, this thing in common that we have, which is that we were both Muslim, and we're all of us together. We left Islam, so now there's a lot of common things that we've gone through. The relationship issues is a very common thing, the losing family members and cutting, or even sometimes you're being the one that's cutting off the family members. I want to recommend everyone does check out your channel as well and subscribe to your blog. There's the link. I wanted to go to a couple of super chats. I'm trying to see if I can figure out how to see them now, because it was a while ago and I don't know if I can see
hopefully
them.
Before we cut off, if I can just give some shout outs. There's people I want to shout out to.
Please do. Yeah,
now, or do you want to wait?
Go ahead. Yeah, I'm going to look for the super chats if I can find them.
So just some shout outs, because I have a feeling my mom is probably watching, and I definitely want to give a shout out to my mom. Love you. And any of my children, they've expressed wanting to watch the interview as well. Definitely Hassan Radwan and his family, Abdullah Gondal and his family. I definitely want to give shout outs to the ex-Muslims of North America and the ex-Muslims of Minnesota. I find that what they're doing is phenomenal. And even though I don't like clickism and stuff like that, I just find that normalizing dissent and normalizing what's going on, it's a necessity. So hopefully keep doing what they're doing. To my man Khalil, he knows who he is. All the ex-Muslims, atheists, agnostics, all the free thinkers, definitely shout outs to all. And then definitely, I gotta mention my Somali ex-Muslim brothers and sisters. Halima Salat, Naz the Kafir, Fadumo. She has this wonderful travel blog. It's called Gabar Escofilan. Check that out. She's talking about being ex-Muslim, being black, being free to do whatever she wants to do. Great blog. I recommend that you check it out. Nuria Benson and the Wak Nation, they're doing their thing as well. And all the ex-Muslims, Somali Muslims, Australia, Canada, the United States, brothers and sisters of Free Somali Minds, almost every Sunday, they're putting out these videos exploring just all of these different topics. They've hit some really good stuff. I really enjoy that. And then, of course, last but not least, to my Walal from another Hoyo, man, can't wait till we can get together and go out and eat. Those are my shout outs.
That's awesome. So I'm not going to take too much more time, and definitely those live chat, those super chats are gone now, but didn't want to interrupt. So I apologize to Stop Scamming Man and anyone else that donated and was asking questions during the live stream, because when you're going through like a very personal story, you don't want to just interrupt. Hey, thanks for the super chat, guys. And it ruins the flow, right? I mean, I do appreciate all of the donations very much. Thank you so much. We'll do this one last question and then we'll end. And I also want to answer. So I'll let you go first, and then I'll say, because I get asked similar questions too. How come it took you 15 years to figure out Islam was false? It's so obvious. Like, some people think it's obvious, eh? And James is a cool guy. I'm sure he doesn't mean it in a bad way. And there was a bunch of people, not a bunch. It was one guy, Muslim guy, Muhammad Saeed, kept asking this question. Why do you think you didn't notice the Asbab al-Nuzul issues the first time you read a classical tafsir? Ibn Kathir, etc., mention a lot of these embarrassing issues. So I'll let you go first, and I also want to answer, and then we'll end it.
That's a really good question. And I think you have to consider the amount of time it takes to learn Arabic fluently and to read. I for a long time, when I became Muslim, most of the advice I got was, you read the books that are translated, but they're not as just and accurate as reading the actual Arabic. And so I put off reading a lot of Arabic works. In the early 90s, the tafsir of Ibn Kathir, it's in several volumes now. I don't think it was published at that time. But even if it had been, I probably wouldn't have read it because I'd have been too busy studying Arabic to actually look at it. And so I was taught Asbab al-Nuzul from a different viewpoint. And it speaks to, like, for example, I'll say this: Sheikh Mukbil has a musnad asbabun nuzul, which means he only includes the authentic narrations that cover the issue of asbabun nuzul. So what does that mean? He has a very small book, right, with very limited ahadith. He doesn't include all of these other ahadith that you'll read in Suyuti or Wahidi or in anybody else's asbab. So the reason for that is when I actually started to read the books of tafsir in Arabic, when I did give it like maybe 5-7 years later, and then it was under the understanding and guidance of you don't read these other books of Asbab al-Nuzul, you just read tafsir. And then when I finally get to Asbab al-Nuzul by Suyuti, look at how many years have gone by. So I wouldn't have known about that in my journey of learning Arabic and seeking knowledge.
So for me, the issue is I never considered Islam to be false. And so everything I was reading was through a rose-tinted lens. When you read Muhammad did this, like, a good example is the Aisha thing, right? Maybe my wife had an issue with it. I'm trying to remember. Like, we had discussions about things that didn't sit well. We were both converts. And I would typically say, I would look up what some sheikh would say about it. And, Allah is the one that chose Aisha for Muhammad or something. So from a religious lens, you don't consider that maybe this was unethical or wrong, or even if it was okay at that time. I'm not getting into that example, but I just mean anything that he did, any example that was bizarre. Like, I was always taught that the 3 divorces rule makes a lot of sense. To me, it was one of the most strangest, weirdest, stupidest things in Islam. This talaq thing, that you can say talaq to someone, to your wife, and you divorced from her, and then you have to wait, and then you can say it again. Not necessarily 3 times at once. A lot of people think I'm talking about 3 times at once, but even 3 times on different incidents. It's one of the most stupidest things that you could be married for. Like, what if you're married your entire lifetime? Like, you could be married for 45 years and you only get 3 chances to say that, and your divorce is over. So now you've created this very bad situation that's very unstable based on a man's mood. And if he says something, or he loses his cool, or maybe he's prone to say things he doesn't, he regrets. Some people are like that. There's all different personalities. So you just it's cognitive dissonance. You recontextualize it in a way that you think it makes sense. And sometimes you get these little pokes, in your, I sometimes say that the Islam is like a canopy, right? It covers everything and it doesn't let any sunlight in. Sometimes you get these little rays of sunlight, they come in, and you're like, hey, that's weird. That doesn't make sense. And you try to cover it up, and sometimes you patch the hole, and then another hole comes. And then eventually you're like, okay, I'm just going to stick my head above the canopy. I'm going to look and see. And that's what happened to me. That's what happened to you. And at that point, you're like, okay, this is all wrong. Like, everything's wrong. But during the process, you kind of like trying to avoid that sunlight. The sunlight's coming in. You're like, oh, this is like hurting my eyes. I don't want to see this, right? And you don't want to know about it. You don't want to think about it. So I think sometimes it's hard for people to understand that, like how difficult it is to question, when you're in the thing. But yeah, that's basically my take on it. And thank you, G Skeptic, for the donations. Again, thank you everyone for the donations. It's very kind of you to give your hard-earned money to the channel, and I do appreciate it. And thank you for the support and for subscribing and all that. Any last words, Aboo Imran? My last words are please check out his channel, please subscribe, and we will continue this journey together on your platform.
Yeah, just like I always end, stay gold, everyone.
Stay gold. Yeah. Okay, everyone. Bye for now. And we'll see you on Aboo Imran's channel. Take care. Bye.